Welcome to the 19th edition of Black and Azul. I'm Jamon Moore. Charles Wollin is on hiatus today. With me is Joel Soria and Alex Morgan. Guys, how's it going?
It's going well. Pleasure. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Took a last week off, so delighted.
I'm happy to be back as well. Should be a fun show.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right. Let's kick it off by talking about the Houston game last night. A 2-0 win out of Via Stadium. Got started maybe a little bit slowly. Alex Morgan, the Quakes did get a goal in the first half, but it did feel like the game was a little bit choppy, a little bit slow at first.
Yeah, it was a little bit languid, slow, sloppy at times, as you say. I think in part that's because Houston really didn't start well. I think they have only one win in their last 4 or 5 games, I think is the stat. And they really didn't show much in the first half. But the Quakes were able to take advantage. The Quakes really controlled the game in possession. And then they obviously came out in the second half with a lot more energy and were able to put the game away.
They started the game without their powerful players up top, Alberth Elise and Manotas as well. Manotas entered the game at halftime. I thought maybe he was going to potentially be a game changer for Houston. However, it turned out the Quakes had other ideas.
Yeah, they also were lacking Kyoto, who started on the bench. He was just playing with Honduras a couple of hours before then, maybe about 24 hours before then. So yeah, the first half it wasn't a fireworks show, that's for sure. It was far from that. It was lethargic from both sides. The Quakes were able to control possession as they usually do. Matias really likes to get the hold of the ball. And then obviously the second half was just completely different. It was night and day to the first half. And leading that charge was Vako, who I think we all agree here. I think he had his best game wearing the black and blue without a doubt. The first half he was able to get that goal. Just a genius tap-in by the Georgian. And like I put on Twitter, someone woke up the Georgian magician. He pulled the rabbit out of the hat.
Yeah, I still can't quite imagine how he managed to contort his body to get that first goal in the back of the net with the little chip. But he scored San Jose's last 5 goals now, and this is exactly what he's needed. We were questioning his commitment. He was benched. He was dropped from the Georgian national team. Obviously, the Quakes went into the transfer market to buy a new forward, Carlos Fierro. All of these things he saw, and he responded. He responded with exactly what he needed to do, and that's the goals. I think another thing is more broadly his body language. It's better. He's making those defensive runs. He's getting stuck in. And you even see in his celebration, he looks a lot more pumped up. And that's translating into really strong performances.
Well, I think what I leave with from last night were those quotes from Matias Almeida speaking about Vako and saying that this is the level that he wants from the Georgian. He wants the Georgian to put these brace performances in. He wants him to be a reversible player. He wants him to go both ways, both in the attack and defending, which was, we were only seeing one side of the coin for the most part from Vako. If that. And I think, we were able to really just back up the critics. No, he's a player that's earning well over $1.5 million a year. He is a player that was supposed to be San Jose when he was first brought in. And I think I've said this before, but I remember the first day when Vako actually was presented to the media, to us media members, I asked Jesse Fiorinelli if Vako was an Almiron-esque type of signing, if that's what they wanted to see from this player. And he said, absolutely, that was what they wanted. For sure, the first 10 games, they were able to get something close to that. But then after that, and specifically in 2019, he was far from it. So, a good performance, but this shouldn't be the last of Vako.
Another thing I remember Jesse talking about, Fiorinelli talking about when they signed Vako, was that it wasn't just the player, it was also the person. And I think for a long time, he's such a reserved player, it was hard to see how he was, in terms of his personality, a fit for the team. But now we're seeing him come out of his shell.
And how
more.
he was dealing with the situation as well.
Exactly. But now I think we're starting to see him come out of his shell more. And that's the growth we need to continue to see from him to justify his salary.
And I think 3 magical words after the game when he did speak to the media last night, which is a rarity. He said, "I am motivated." And I thought that that was really telling as to where Vaco is at right now. In fact, Almeida himself basically said that he felt at the beginning of the season, in so many words, that Vaco was not motivated, and now he's here. And now I think we have a great opportunity to see what he's truly capable of. And I think before we were talking about maybe we see him transferring out mid-season. I think that's pretty highly unlikely at this point, even with some of the new talent that's going to be coming in.
I would say so. And another thing he was saying pretty frequently last night was that he was happy. So he's motivated, he's happy, he's scoring goals, he's both playing on both sides of the ball. This is what you need from a designated player. The Quakes haven't had the best designated players. This was definitely a breath of fresh air for everyone on the field, representing the Quakes, and for everyone in the stands. Like I said, though, this needs to be a performance that isn't going to be the aberration. Vaco needs to be putting in these shifts, game in and game out.
So another thing that we had last night was the 4th clean sheet of the season after only 2 last season, both of which came in 0-0 draws. The Quakes didn't even win their clean sheets last season. Now they have 4 of them. Daniel Vega was obviously very happy after the game with the defensive performance. He had a new combination in front of him, Guram Kashia and Flo Youngworth paired together that had not been paired together this season at the center back position. And also young Marcos Lopez. Looks like he is getting a little bit more comfortable. What did you guys see from the defense last night?
Look, I think it just speaks to how far the Quakes have come. When they first played Houston earlier this season, that was the nadir of their season. They were at the bottom of the table then. Now they've come so far. They're in a playoff position. This win cemented their spot in a playoff position. And even though they have so many rotating pieces, even though there are international absences, even though we have a couple injury reports to talk about, even with new players coming into the lineup, they've been able to keep the consistent improvements coming. And we see that at the back too. With in the midfield, first of all, that's important. With Ewell and Judson, they're able to keep the midfield under lock. And then at the back, you have Youngworth and Kashia both putting in solid performances. And at left back, Lopez as well, who we were saying we think had one of his best games for San Jose.
Yeah, I think he had his best game by far, actually, in San Jose, without a doubt. He was able to get up and down the field. He was really combining, with the passes, and we saw that really exciting sequence. He was actually the one who commenced it, and he was the one who finished it off, put it right over the bar. But this is the type of player, that can give you those exhilarating moments when going forward. In the back, he's not that solid rock, right? He's not the best one-on-one defender, but he can really go up. He's daring, and that's what you want at times from a young fullback. And he was able to deliver that. I think, we saw his highlights for Sporting Cristal. I think this was the closest thing to that.
Yeah, and we saw in that moment, that was captured by one of the MLSsoccer.com analysts, Matt Doyle, to say, look, you all need to be watching the Quakes. They're an exciting team right now. In fact, we've got a couple quotes that were shared by the SJEarthquakes.com account today on their Twitter account. And it's from Matt Doyle and also from Bobby Warshaw. These are 2 pretty exciting quotes and getting national recognition now. The first one here is, the San Jose Earthquakes are a top 5 team in MLS, and if you're not watching them regularly, you're missing out. And then Bobby Warshaw, that's from Matt Doyle, Bobby Warshaw adds and says, San Jose have turned into a freewheeling, swag-stepping, dream-stomping monster.
It's a great quote.
What do you think about those quotes, Alex Morgan?
It's a great quote, and I would have to agree. I've been covering San Jose for 5 years now. I started when the team first moved into Avaya Stadium in 2015. Maybe. And I have to say that in all my time covering the team, I think this is the most high-functioning they've been playing. It just looks like it's really coming together now. Even against LAFC in the Open Cup. They lost that match, but I think that was one of their strongest performances of the season. If not for a couple unlucky finishing chances early in the second half, they really could have moved on in the U.S. Open Cup there. And that just shows you that they're going toe-to-toe with some of Major League Soccer's best teams right now.
Yeah,
Are they a top 5 team?
I think so. I mean, in terms of excitement, in terms of ingenuity, I think so, without a doubt. Overall, do they have are they in the top 5? Probably not. I would say maybe they're within the 10 best teams in the league for sure. But just to echo what Alex was saying, I think you hit the nail on the head there, or hit the nail on the head. Yeah,
Yes,
right.
You're
I
right.
said it right.
You're right.
Anyways, this team has changed so much since March. In March, it seemed like not even Matias Almeida was able to turn around this project. But, with repetition, with voicing that same methodology time and time again, it almost sounded like Almeida was a broken record when we would speak to him, week in and week out. But it's part of the method that he's using to really just flip the switch on these players, and it's coming along, and it looks like it's going to be one of the biggest turnarounds in MLS history.
One of the key things for me, I think you see it in the small details too, in the set plays. From every corner, they're taking advantage of it with a set play. That's how Vaco scored his first goal. It was a short corner and right into Vaco at the near post to flick over. They had another in the second half that was gorgeous play, and Wondolowski really should have finished it. But it's in all these tiny details that they're seeing come to fruition.
And Jake Pisani from Earthquakes PR reminded us that this team is actually on a points per game basis since the beginning of April, the second best team in the Western Conference behind LAFC. That's saying quite a bit right now. Can they keep up this pace? I think is the big question. And the next big test, without a doubt, is going to come at the biggest game of the year, Stanford Stadium, 7:30 p.m. this Saturday against the LA Galaxy. What do you guys foresee for this particular game?
I foresee a Boca Juniors, River Plate-esque type of environment. Obviously, with the connections there, Guillermo Barros Queloto representing Boca Juniors, and obviously Matias Almeida representing, in this case, I guess, River Plate. But two friends, two coaches who really know each other, who know their styles, who know each other's styles and know each other personally as well. But I think it's exciting, it couldn't come at a better time for the Quakes, and it really couldn't come at a better time for both teams, given the fact that LAFC and LA Galaxy, that rivalry now, El Tráfico, is starting to take a lot of the limelight away from the California Clásico. It's destined to be a great match. The Quakes are obviously playing a very entertaining brand of soccer, as we all know, and as we all witnessed last night. But then you have LA Galaxy, who I think are going to be a team to reckon with in the playoffs. Yeah. Ibrahimovic should be available. Yes, they won't have a couple of pieces, and one of those being Jonathan Dos Santos, who's out, with the Mexican national team in the Gold Cup. But I still believe that, when games are played between both sides at Stanford, there's just something magical, and I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Look, it's going to be a really fun one, and I think anything can happen. When you have all the emotions, last year we saw the bad blood between David Bingham and Wondolowski, former teammates. When you have the emotions running high at Stanford Stadium, when you throw Zlatan in the mix, really anything can happen. And I think, as you said, Joel, this is a great time for this game for the Quakes. They have a lot of momentum going into this one. But the Galaxy are strong. They're in second place in the West. They've been somewhat inconsistent of late, but I think anything could happen.
And the Quakes are dealing with a few injuries. And they are dealing with a national team absence with Nick Lima. We do have an update on many of these injuries. Joel, what is the team telling you right now?
Well, I reported this not too long ago, actually, a couple hours ago, but it sounds like Danny Husen is going to be questionable up until game time. I would bet that he probably isn't going to play or even dress up. Shea Salinas, on the other hand, it really sounds like he's going to be available for selection. We'll see what Almeida decides to do with him. Regarding Paul Marie, I have yet to hear anything, but Shea Salinas should be back for Saturday night.
I would add that, according to the team, both Husen and Salinas are training in full. There's no official confirmation as to whether they'll be able to line up. As you say, Husen's looking a little more touch and go, and Salinas a little more solid. But I don't even know if they'd be able to crack the starting lineup. Honestly, with the way that Vaco, Eriksson, and Espinosa were playing against Houston, I don't know if Salinas would be able to get into the starting lineup considering how well they've been playing.
Yeah, you would suspect that Almeida would field the same 11 that he did last night.
And the big injury news, Anibal Godoy, we know had some scar tissue removed for a repetitive groin injury that he had been sustaining. He was pulled out of the Gold Cup for Panama, and we know that now that he's going to be out about 6 weeks. What is it that the Quakes are going to need to do in this midfield to account for the absence of Anibal Godoy through probably what is going to be their toughest stretch of the season, where they play 2 games many weeks in a row?
Yeah, well, I think we saw a good substitution or a good, sort of a patch there from Jutsun. I thought he did well with Jackson Ewell. At times he seems a little shaky. He likes to spray the ball around, and he's not the most accurate passer, right? I think we can all agree on that. He's more of an enforcer, more of a mini destroyer, I should say. But he was able to really fit in that role quite well. It didn't really look like they needed Godoy last night. But then again, you were going up against a depleted Houston squad who's not going through their best moment as of now. You pair this team up the same way with that duo in the heart of the field up against a team like the Galaxy, and things could really go south.
Look, I think the key is that Judson needs to remain in the middle. He needs to be solid defensively, and he can let Ewell do a lot of the passing, because Ewell, as of late, his vision and his balls over the top have been brilliant. He's been one of the best improvements for the Quakes this season. So I think that'll be the key. It'll be a really tough stretch going forward. Not only do you have Godoy missing, you have Cummings at the Gold Cup. So with those 2 midfield players out, there's really not a lot of room for depth behind Judson and Ewell, or either of the center backs. So I think it'll be a test of the depth of this team, and I think Almeida will have to be careful with 4 games in these 2-week stretch with the players that he fields in the rotation.
I mean, the Quakes move right off of this game with the LA Galaxy. They head straight onto the road to play a midweek game with the Minnesota United side that they're battling with for playoff positioning with. And then they immediately follow that up with the home game with RSL. It gets really busy very fast. The depth of the team is going to be tested. And now we have an announcement that we've got a new player that's being added to the team, a new transfer, and that was announced this week. That is Carlos Fierro. And we've got a quote from Almeida on Fierro. Almeida says that he's very happy. He's convinced that he wanted to be here. When we talked about it with our directors, Jesse, and our president, we prioritize when a player wants to be here. They don't come over here to earn a lot of money. Carlos Fierro comes for passion, love, and because he wants to succeed. That's what I value. That's what I value with our directors, and we keep believing that we work as a team, not with superstars. Joel, you asked the question that Almeida responded to in the press conference that led up to that. What were your impressions of what Almeida's expectations are on Fierro?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to leave with that last sentence buried at the very, very bottom of that short paragraph. And it was Almeida talking about this team being composed of 11 players, I guess 11 average players, opposed to having 1 or 2 superstars and then the rest just being players, run-of-the-mill players, you can call it. I'm leaving with that. It really, really says a lot about the direction that this team is taking, and that is the same one that they've always been on. This team really isn't going to open up their pockets all that much more with Almeida at the helm. They're going to continue on with the same methodology, the same transfer methodology, the same acquisition methodology, and that is one of, trying to find ways to maximize, the allocated money that you have. And in this case, the Quakes are, I guess, right dead in the middle, if not in the bottom third. So far, I think this season, they've been able to do wonders with it. And a lot of that credit, if not all the credit, goes to Matias Almeida and his coaching staff. But in regards to Fierro, I think it really says a lot about the effect that Matias has on this team. He's able to convince players who could very well be playing at a higher level, right? Probably making more money elsewhere, in this case Fierro. But, there's something to him. There's something to his persona. and that is, I guess to us, to the observer, to the person on the outside looking in, we will never really fully understand what it is that really convinces other people, in regards to Matias and his charm. But in this case, they're bringing in Fierro, and I think that as a TAM player, he can definitely do well for this team.
That's a double R. You got to roll it, apparently. Fierro.
Yeah.
All right. So let me toss it over to you for the next part here. He's another speedy winger. Maybe has the same type of speed that you see in a player like Espinoza and Shea Salinas. In fact, now we expect there to be some competition on the wings for some of this playing time, particularly with Vaco starting to step up, Shea Salinas coming back from injury. We talked to Almeida a bit last night about, what he's expecting to do with more talent on the wings, adding Fierro into the mix. What do you think is going to be happening here?
Yeah, Almeida will have a lot of options. You have Shea on the left side, who's made good connections with Wando and Husin up top. You have Vaco, who's been on a tear recently. And the Quakes there's even been rumors of the Quakes adding more forward options up top. I think if I'm Almeida, I'm probably imagining Fierro going on the left wing and moving Vaco into the middle to take Eriksson's spot. But then obviously you have Eriksson who could make his case. And you have 3 games before we expect Fierro to be able to play for the Quakes. The secondary transfer window opens on July 9th. The Quakes play the LA Galaxy on July 12th. That's when, assuming all of his permits go through as expected, we'll expect him to start play and make his debut for the Quakes. So the other Quakes players have 3 games to make their case. I think he fits on the left, and I think he's particularly well poised to score there, considering that one of his strengths from looking through all of his highlights is finishing crosses in the middle. And given all of the good balls that Espinoza has been putting into the middle of this season, I think he's in a good spot to really get on the score sheet. And I think another thing with him is Joel was talking about, him being a part of a team. He's played for Almeida before. He's well aware of his system, and I think that's one of the key things in his signing. He'll be able to transition into this team a lot more seamlessly. We saw how long it took for the Quakes players to be able to adapt to the system. Fierro will already have a clue how to play in Almeida's system, so he'll be much, much more well prepared to fit right into this team and make an immediate impact.
Okay. And now we've got one more transfer. It's been heavily rumored. I think we've got a pretty good confirmation that it's going to happen. Andres, otherwise known as Andy Rios. What's your information on Rios?
I mean, it's a done deal. He's going to be traveling to San Jose in the coming weeks along with Fierro, and he is going to add to Matias's headache on selection up top. A player that certainly is on a downhill. He hasn't gotten much playing time whatsoever at Racing, who I believe recently won the league title there in Argentina. A big team, absolutely, but he's just been absent from the plans there, and before then he was in Brazil, where I guess he wasn't really all that convincing either to the fans there. So it's certainly, to me at least, a very questionable signing, to be honest with you. I don't think the Quakes should have really reached for this type of player. A player that, yes, is only 29 years of age, but giving Matias's, understanding of what he wants and what he needs, I feel this is more of a,
surplus to requirements.
Yeah, surplus, or maybe, he might be doing the guy a favor. I don't know. I don't want to stretch it too far, but to me, this is certainly the most mind-boggling out of all the moves that Matias has made.
Look, I think you have to ask yourself, at what point is it too much depth? At what point does it start to cause problems in the locker room? And who's the odd man out? And you have to think about that dynamic. I think, for me, this move really only makes sense if you're preparing for a Chris Wondolowski retirement. That's really the only reason I see to have a third starting caliber forward on your lineup. Well, but I don't know if that's the situation the Quakes are in yet.
Yeah, well, if you want to look at it that way, then I guess you can also say that Carlos Fierro's arrival is because they're, getting prepared for Espinoza's departure.
Potentially.
In December. I from what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like they have any chances of keeping Espinoza.
Well, I think Espinoza is making a case for himself. He's trying to impress the club that has him on loan. He's trying to get get back to his club and be able to get the time that he thought he was going to get when he was signed. And he's young, and he's got an opportunity here, and he certainly proved his worth for the San Jose Earthquakes this season. A little bit more about Rios: 10 goals and 57 appearances when he was at Vasco da Gama. He did play for Matias at River Plate. He had 5 goals and 46 appearances for them. Obviously, Matias has done a great job in reclaiming some players this season that maybe people had cast off. Maybe Vaco is a good example of someone who maybe we had stopped believing in.
Tommy
thought
Thompson.
that he didn't have it. Yeah, exactly. And so maybe there's some Matias magic here.
Certainly.
This could be the start of phase 2 of his plan.
Could be the start of phase 2. Any other transfer rumors at this time that are worth talking about?
I haven't heard anything else, and I would highly doubt that anything else happens outside of these two.
Okay. Well, of course, as Charles would say, your questions are the heartbeat of this show. We've got several in here. Let's get to them.
Oh, there's a lot.
Well, we had the first question was, any idea when we will see Carlos Fierro's first game as a Quake? I think we got a good idea on that. The first game could be the away LA Galaxy game on July 12th.
Yeah.
But it basically probably will depend on his fitness, I would
That
imagine.
too.
Okay. And also the rumor about Rios has been addressed. So, with the addition of Fierro, where else do we need support in the field? This question comes from Emmanuel TWR. With the addition of Fierro, where else do we need more support in the field, and who do you see may leave the club in the summer transfer window? Where do the Quakes need support right now if this is all they're going to be able to do in the transfer
I
window?
think they need support in the midfield. You have 3 players of starting caliber in the central midfield: Ewell, Judson, and Godoy. But right now with Godoy out, I think there isn't a lot of depth in that particular position, but I don't know how much room they have to be able to bring anybody else on this season. I don't think there is any.
Yeah, I guess I would double down on that. And I don't even know if Judson is really a starting caliber player. I think he's borderline starter, borderline, first off the bench type of player. Maybe also look into the fullback position. Without Nick Lima, you can really see that they're very thin there.
Last night, one of the Quakes' young homegrown players, Gilbert Fuentes, got an opportunity to show what he could do on the pitch. Maybe showed up a longtime veteran in Tommy McNamara, actually drew a yellow card for McNamara there.
Yeah.
Where does he fit? This is a question from Brian Alamillo. Where does Fuentes fit in with this team, and what is his path for more playing time? It was nice seeing him come off the bench last night. Alex.
I don't know if he shapes into the first team picture at this point. I think that he'd probably have to have a sustained loan period with Reno or another USL side before he's really ready to step up and become a big fixture for this Quakes team.
I reckon the Quakes would be making a mistake if they were to loan him out to Reno. You wouldn't want him to fail at that level with the.
But then how would you get him up to the MLS level?
Well, with all the he's generated so much hype, and this is a type of player that you can't afford to do poorly at a lower American level. You need to give him first minutes in MLS right away. I don't know where exactly you give him those minutes because, as we were talking about, there's really no space in this 11 as of right now. But he's an 8. Yep. He likes, and I think that as time progresses, he's probably going to feel a little more comfortable going forward. He's not much of a defender whatsoever. He doesn't have the capacities to really defend all that well. So I would say you have to find a way, like they did last night, in these games where the Quakes are obviously the dominating team, and get him those minutes and get him that value on the field. We talked about this before, Jamon. This is a player that really has everything going for him in terms of making a move abroad. You signed him at the age of 15, 16 years of age. He has an agent that is only monitoring Pulisic, by the way. He's representing Pulisic. That's
a pretty good agent.
Yeah, it's a pretty good agent. So the connections are there. They can get him a team in Europe, probably as of today, if they really wanted to.
And that's agent. His specialty is bringing young American players to Europe.
Right.
That's his specialty.
Right.
I mean, it goes to why does a club bring in a homegrown player? Why do they make that signing? And as MLS becomes more of a selling league, it's going to become important to see these homegrowns be able to transfer out of MLS bring that revenue back to the club and invest back in the academies in order to be able to work on the next generation of players and develop them and get them ready as well. And that becomes a cycle that that clubs, European clubs in particular, have been able to do over time to be able to produce revenue.
Well, and I think it's a little tricky from the Earthquakes perspective, because they also want to consider, how do we hold on to these players for as long as possible, and how do we get the most out of them while we can? And I think that's
certainly not loaning them to Reno, though.
Well, I think keeping them within there, I think Reno is at this point a stop sort of on the progression of the Earthquakes from the academy to the first team, and keeping them within the system, and especially not letting them go abroad. I think that's sort of been their approach so far, and that's why they're signing these young academy players, and we see it training. That's why they're bringing some of their young academy players to train with the first team, is to prevent them from going abroad.
A little bit more lively than I was expecting tonight. That's a great question, by the way, and we could talk about the youngsters for quite some time. Moving on, one final question from Ryan Miller. Are we worried about Vako becoming a ball hog again after this performance? Similar after his golazo with the national team. Ryan, you said it, not us, but let me toss the question over to you guys.
I think I was speaking about this in the press box last night. Vako really walks on a fine line between, magician or ball hog. He's one or the other, usually. And I think last night, for the first, 80 minutes, we saw a genius Vako, and then towards the latter stages of the match, we started seeing that that Vako, that ladder Vako. I won't say that word again, but he doesn't like to pass the ball at times, and we were starting to see that last night. And let's hope it doesn't happen. But I think he's in a good place right now. There's really no reason to start ripping him apart. He did everything well last night. He can continue doing it with ease. His level, as Vegas said it, is just above anything that maybe most of his teammates have ever seen.
If he's bought in and motivated, Alex, how high is his ceiling, and is he going to be that type of team player that we haven't seen in the past?
Well, I think he would be, by far the best player in the Quakes. He'd be the Quakes' marquee player. I think one of the things we were talking earlier, and I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said that Vako trusts certain players. He has a lot of trust with Magnus Eriksson, and you see them having really good connections. But with other players with whom he has less trust, he's less willing to give the ball. I think we started to see against Houston him develop some of that trust with Marcos Lopez down the left wing. And he put the ball in for Lopez behind on the left a couple times. So we'll really need to see him start building more of those connections up top.
Thank you for all your questions. We got some great ones tonight. I believe we answered them throughout the show. And so with that, we're going to end episode number 19 of Black and Azul. Of course, we will hopefully see you back here next week for episode 20 and Charles Wollin back in studio. It's the Clásico week, boys. This is an episode almost as big as the Clásico itself. Not quite, but we thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. For people on our podcast, thank you for listening and subscribing. As always, for Charles Wollin, for Joel Soria, for Alex Morgan, for our executive producer, Jason Sholl, and our associate producer, Aaron Sholl, I am Jamon Moore. Follow us on Twitter and be able to get all your Quakes news about the Clásico as it happens this week. Thank you. Have a good night.